The creak of the rusty door hinges greeted Yin as she came home. The old wall clock in the dimly lit living room showed 11:30 at night. Her bones felt like they were about to fall apart after taking an endless overtime shift at the marketing agency where she worked just for some extra commission. However, instead of finding the house empty and dark, she saw her grandfather and father sitting across from each other in the living room, both of them wearing extremely tense expressions. "You're home, sweetheart," her father greeted, pulling an old wooden chair out for Yin to sit on. His voice sounded raspier than usual. "Dad, Grandpa, why are you guys still up? It's almost midnight," Yin said, taking off her shoes, which were already slightly peeling at the edges. She rubbed her sore neck, staring at the two men she loved most with a furrowed brow. Her grandfather cleared his throat softly, looking at Yin with gentle eyes that still held a firmness he rarely showed. "Sit down first, Yin. There's something important we need to talk to you about tonight." Yin did as he said, even though she was starting to get a bad feeling. Her heart beat a little faster. "What's going on? Is Dad sick? Or Grandpa? We're gonna set you up with someone." Her grandfather's words cut through Yin's string of worries like a bolt of lightning. Silence filled the room for a moment. Yin looked back and forth between the two older men in front of her, searching for any sign that they were joking, but there was none. Their faces were serious, way too serious. "Grandpa, you can't be serious. An arranged marriage? In this day and age?" Yin let out an awkward laugh, shaking her head hard enough to make some of her loosely tied hair fall out. "No, I don't want this. I'm still focused on my job." "Just hear me out first, Yin," her grandfather said, his voice trembling slightly as he pleaded for her to understand. "Last week, when an earthquake hit the hospital where I work as a janitor, I happened to be cleaning a VVIP room. There was this old man around my age who got trapped because a big cabinet fell on his leg. Everyone was freaking out. People were running everywhere. I pulled him out just before the ceiling above him came crashing down. You saved his life, and that's amazing. You're a hero. But what does that have to do with setting me up with someone?" Yin's voice started to rise, her feelings a mess of panic, exhaustion, and confusion. Her grandfather reached into the pocket of his faded flannel shirt, pulled out a photograph, and placed it on the wooden table. "His name is Jungkook. He's the grandson of that old man. Their family is really rich, Yin, really powerful. And this guy, after seeing your picture, he said yes. The old man feels like he owes me his life, and he wants to make sure our family can live well as a way of paying me back. I agreed because I want you to have a better life, sweetheart." Yin glanced briefly at the photo. A man with a sharp jawline, dark, piercing eyes, and an aura that seemed capable of freezing the air around him just through a piece of paper. "Grandpa, you're trading your friend's life for me? Dad, say something. You don't agree with this, right? Please tell Grandpa this is crazy." But her father only lowered his head, squeezing his rough fingers, hardened from years of working in a factory. When he finally looked up, his old eyes were already filled with tears. "I agree, Yin." Yin was stunned, her breath caught in her throat. "Dad, how could you? I'm a failure of a man, Yin," her father suddenly shouted, his voice hoarse as he held back his breaking sobs, hitting his own chest hard. "I'm just some low-paid factory worker. I can't buy you decent clothes, I can't give you a safe home, and I have to let you work until midnight, getting yelled at by your boss, just so the three of us can eat. What if I die tomorrow? What if your grandpa dies tomorrow? Who's gonna take care of you in this cruel world? Dad, what are you even saying? Don't talk like you and Grandpa are gonna die tomorrow and leave me. Nobody knows when they're gonna die, so don't say stuff like that." Yin shot back as tears started pouring down her cheeks. She hated seeing her father put himself down like that. "That's exactly why death can come anytime, Yin," her father replied, his voice now softer, filled with deep desperation. "You remember your mom? She was perfectly healthy back then. She left for the market with a smile and even made us breakfast before she went. But then what? An accident took her life that afternoon without warning. Death doesn't wait until we're ready, sweetheart. I'm scared every single night. I just want to see you in the hands of someone who can protect you, someone who can make sure you'll be okay, before I close my eyes for good." Yin's defenses completely crumbled. Her shoulders shook violently. Beneath her fierce refusal was another, deeper fear, one she had never told her father or grandfather about. Memories from her college years came rushing back mercilessly. Her ex-boyfriend, who came from a wealthy family, looking down on her with arrogance when Yin was struggling. That man called her a gold digger, a poor leech who was only after his money. The trauma stayed with her like a burned scar on her heart. Yin was scared. She was terrified of being stepped on, looked down on, and thrown away again by someone with money. But seeing her father's tears now falling onto his worn-out fabric pants, along with the sincere pleading look in her grandfather's eyes, Yin realized she had no choice. With her voice trembling and her heart feeling like it was being squeezed until it shattered, she swallowed the bitter lump in her throat and whispered softly, "Okay, if this is what lets you and Grandpa sleep peacefully tonight, I'll do it." The wedding happened so fast, as if time had suddenly taken control of her life away from her. It was a very private ceremony, with tight security at every corner of the building, no cameras or crowds in sight, making it clear that her husband's family was definitely not ordinary. At the altar, Yin stood there with her fingers growing cold, watching the man named Jungkook recite his vows with a blank expression and a voice as cold as ice. There was no smile, no warmth. After the ceremony was over, Jungkook immediately took Yin to a luxurious penthouse on the top floor of a skyscraper in the heart of Seoul. The moment the private elevator doors opened, Yin swallowed hard, her steps hesitant. Along the hallway leading to the living room, several muscular men in black suits stood there, stiffly bowing their heads in respect as Jungkook walked in. In another corner, a line of neatly uniformed servants greeted them. Yin gripped the edge of her coat. "Who are they? Why are there so many guys guarding the house?" she asked in a trembling voice, staring at the guards whose builds and stares were incredibly intimidating. "They work for me. They're here to keep this place safe," Jungkook answered shortly, taking off his suit jacket and handing it to a servant without looking back. "Don't worry about them. Go to the bedroom." Yin struggled to keep up with Jungkook's long strides. The master bedroom was probably as big as her entire old house. Huge glass windows showed the glittering lights of Seoul from high above. Everything screamed luxury, and Yin felt incredibly small, like a speck of dust ruining the beauty of the place. That night, Yin sat stiffly on the edge of the massive bed, her body tense as Jungkook came out of the bathroom wearing dark silk pajamas. "Go to sleep," Jungkook ordered, walking toward the other side of the bed and pulling back the covers. Yin looked at the man hesitantly, hugging her knees. "We're sleeping in the same bed?" Jungkook stopped what he was doing, looking at Yin with his dark, unreadable eyes. "Of course, we're married, unless you'd rather sleep on the floor." Without saying much, Yin lay down on the farthest edge of the bed, pulling the blanket up to her chest. There was a huge distance between them. Silence took over. Deep down, Yin was secretly grateful that the man didn't touch her at all on their first night. They really just lay there. However, Yin couldn't close her eyes even for a second. Her mind was racing, making her realize that she was now trapped inside a golden cage with a man who was no different from a wall of ice. In the middle of the silence, Jungkook suddenly moved. He reached his strong arm across the bed and placed a pitch-black rectangular card on the pillow right in front of Yin's face. "What's this?" Yin whispered, her eyes widening as she stared at the black card. "A credit card," Jungkook answered flatly, propping himself up on one elbow as he looked at Yin. "Use it for whatever you need. Buy clothes, food, or give it to your family." Yin jolted upright, immediately shaking her head and pushing the card back toward Jungkook. "No, I don't need it. I still have a job, and I have my own salary. Please take it back." "Your salary as a regular employee isn't ever gonna be enough to cover the lifestyle here," Jungkook shot back, his voice rising slightly, clearly annoyed by Yin's refusal. "I don't need some fancy lifestyle. I can take care of myself," Yin insisted, heat starting to creep up her neck. Memories of her ex-boyfriend came rushing back like a broken record. She hated being treated like she was helpless. She hated the thought that one day this man might throw the money he gave her back in her face. Jungkook quickly grabbed Yin's wrist. His grip wasn't rough, but it was strong enough to keep Yin from pulling her hand away. The man placed the black card right into Yin's palm, then forced her fingers shut around it. "Take it," Jungkook hissed, his tone making it sound like an absolute order from a boss to an employee. "You're my wife now. I don't want to hear people out there gossiping that Jungkook lets his wife look like she's struggling. Keep the card, or you're making me look like a useless husband." Jungkook let go of Yin's hand on his own, turned over with his back facing her, and pulled the blanket up to his shoulders. "Go to sleep. Don't start making a scene on our first night." Yin was left in the suffocating silence of the night. She stared blankly at the black card in her hand, her vision blurring with tears. Her fingers trembled, not because she was happy about receiving unlimited wealth, but because of the humiliation and fear taking root in her chest all over again. She clenched her fist tightly, squeezing the edge of the hard card until her knuckles turned deathly pale. Biting down hard on her lower lip, Yin stared at her husband's broad back across the bed and silently swore to herself, "I'll never use a single cent of your money, Jungkook, not even if I die." The following nights passed like a broken record, playing the same monotonous scene over and over again. Yin's fear from the first night slowly faded away, replaced by confusion that filled her mind. Jungkook really never touched her, let alone demanding his rights as a husband. The man barely even looked at her unless he absolutely had to. At the dining table, which was long enough to seat 10 people, they only sat at opposite ends, accompanied by the clinking of spoons and porcelain plates breaking the tense silence. "You don't want some more soup?" Yin finally worked up the courage to break the silence one morning, staring at Jungkook's empty bowl. She felt like she had to at least try to interact with him, just so she wouldn't feel like some ghost living in this massive penthouse. Jungkook put down his spoon without a sound, slowly wiped his lips with a cloth napkin, then looked at Yin with eyes as cold as ice. "I've got a chef and servants to take care of my meals. You don't have to go out of your way to act like an extra servant in this house." The words came out without a raised voice, but their sharpness still cut straight through Yin's heart. She lowered her head, gripping her fork tightly. "I'm just trying to be polite as your wife. I feel like a stranger here." "You're not a stranger anymore now that you're officially married to me," Jungkook replied flatly, standing from his chair and straightening his flawless black suit. "Don't worry about stuff you don't need to. I've gotta go." The front door closed with a soft thud. Once again, the same question popped into her head. Did the man marry her because he was forced to? Her fear flared up again. She didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want to become some leech people would mock for not being able to stand on her own. From that day on, Yin decided to spend her time outside the penthouse. She took every overtime offer at her office, burying herself in piles of marketing proposals and data analysis until late at night. The less time she spent under Jungkook's roof, the more she felt like she could keep herself sane. The black credit card remained untouched in the drawer of her vanity. However, Yin's escape from reality completely fell apart on a gloomy Tuesday afternoon. Her phone rang loudly in the middle of the bustling noise of the photocopier. Her father's name appeared on the screen. "Hi Dad, what's up? Why are you calling this late?" Yin greeted cheerfully, trying to hide how exhausted she was. There was a brief silence from the other end before the sound of rough, restrained sobs reached Yin's ears. "Yin, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm such an idiot." Yin's heart seemed to drop into her stomach. "Dad, are you crying? What's wrong? What happened to Grandpa?" "Not your grandpa, sweetheart. It's me." The middle-aged man's voice trembled badly, mixed with desperate breaths. "My friend, Uncle Choi. He offered me this investment with really high returns. I got tempted because I didn't want to trouble you anymore. I borrowed money from a loan shark for that investment, but Uncle Choi ran off. The money's gone, Yin. And now those loan sharks keep threatening our house. They said they're gonna burn it down if I don't pay this month's installment today." Yin's world stopped spinning. Her eyes widened as she stared at her computer screen, which suddenly blurred behind her tears. "Dad, how much did you borrow?" When her father told her the amount, Yin's breath caught in her throat. It was hundreds of millions. All the savings she'd built from years of working didn't even come close to half of it. Her hands trembled violently as she pressed a hand against her suddenly pounding forehead. "Don't panic, Dad. I'll transfer all my savings right now to cover this month's payment." "Don't go meet them. Just lock the doors and stay inside." After that phone call, Yin's life turned into a never-ending nightmare. Her savings were completely drained, leaving almost nothing behind. She always came home to the penthouse after 1 in the morning, dark circles under her eyes, her body growing thinner because she often skipped meals just to save every last bit of her paycheck. She refused to give up. She would never beg her cold husband for help, and she didn't want to prove that stupid gold digger label that had haunted her for so long. Until one night, the autumn wind blew violently against the penthouse bedroom balcony. Jungkook had just returned after finishing a cleanup mission at the harbor. The smell of metal, smoke, and exhaustion lingered from his black shirt, its sleeves rolled up carelessly. He roughly loosened his tie, planning to head straight for the bathroom, but the man's steps froze at the glass door connecting the bedroom to the balcony. Under the dim moonlight, he saw the silhouette of his wife curled up in the corner of the balcony, hugging her knees while holding her phone to her ear. Yin's small shoulders were shaking violently, and the sound of her desperate sobs cut through the wind. "Please, sir, I'm begging you. Just give me 1 more week." Yin's voice sounded hoarse and desperate, nothing like the stubborn tone she usually used with Jungkook. "I know I'm 3 days late, but I've really run out of savings. I can't get another loan from the bank. My limit's already maxed out. I swear I'll pay it back soon." Jungkook held his breath, his hand gripping the door handle clenched into a tight fist until his knuckles turned white. "I'll work night shifts. If I have to, I'll work until morning every single day. I'll do anything, but please don't hurt or bother my family. I'm begging you, sir. Please have mercy on my dad and grandpa." Yin sobbed uncontrollably, hiding her face between her knees. Behind the glass door, Jungkook's chest tightened hard, struck by an overwhelming wave of anger. He was angry, but not at the woman crying in front of him. He was angry at himself. For the first time in his life, Jungkook, the man most feared in Seoul's underworld, felt completely useless. His wife, the woman who was legally under his protection, was sobbing as if she were kneeling at the feet of some low-level loan shark, begging for a few bills that Jungkook normally spent just to open a bottle of wine. Jungkook slowly stepped back into the shadows. His jaw tightened. He realized something that slapped his ego hard. Yin would rather throw away her pride in front of street criminals than ask her own husband for help. Was Yin really that afraid of him? Was the wall between them really that high? Was that gold digger label really that terrifying to his wife that she'd rather destroy herself alone while Jungkook slept on top of a pile of money? That very night, Jungkook called his right-hand man and gave him one absolute order. The next day, the sun was blazing, but Yin felt like her body had frozen solid. As she walked out of her office building to get some fresh air, 3 intimidating-looking men with scars on their necks blocked her path. Yin instinctively stepped back, her eyes widening in panic. Her heart was pounding wildly, pumping adrenaline through her body until her knees went weak. It was them, the loan sharks. What do you guys want? I told you I need more time, Yin screamed with a trembling voice, hugging her work bag against her chest like a shield. Don't touch me. However, instead of dragging her away or yelling at her, the 3 terrifying men suddenly bowed 90 degrees in unison before Yin. The biggest man stepped forward with trembling hands and handed her a thick red folder. We're so sorry, ma'am, the man blurted out, his panic impossible to hide. This is the official debt clearance letter and your dad's house certificate. Everything's been paid off. Not a single cent left. Please forgive us, ma'am. Please don't let us lose our lives today. Yin stared blankly at the folder. She didn't take it. Her head was spinning. What do you mean? Is it paid off? Who paid it? I haven't transferred anything yet. The 3 men bowed again, this time so low they almost touched the asphalt with their faces. Your husband, ma'am, Mr. Jungkook. He took care of everything this morning. Please, we're begging you again, forgive us. They placed the folder on the ground and ran away as fast as they could, like they'd just seen a ghost. Yin stood there frozen. Her ears were ringing. With ice-cold hands, she reached for her phone and searched for her husband's number, which had only been sitting there unused in her contacts all this time. He answered on the second ring. Yeah, Jungkook's deep voice came from the other end, calm and steady. Jungkook, what did you do? Yin asked between shaky breaths, tears gathering in her eyes again, this time from a mix of overwhelming relief and fear over the debt she now felt she owed him. You got it, Jungkook replied flatly. Come home now. I can't, I'm still at work. I can't just skip out. My manager's gonna get mad at me if I... Your manager wouldn't dare do anything to you. I already called your CEO. You're allowed to leave, even permanently if you want, Jungkook cut in firmly. Turn around and look at the street. A luxurious brand new black sedan pulled up right beside Yin. The window rolled down, revealing one of the muscular men in sunglasses who usually guarded the penthouse. Ma'am, let me take you home, the man said respectfully. Yin had no choice but to get into the car. Throughout the drive, her mind couldn't think straight. How did Jungkook know? What was he going to ask for in return? Was he going to mock her now? However, the car wasn't heading to the penthouse. Instead, it stopped at a very exclusive 5-star restaurant. A neatly dressed waiter immediately greeted her, guiding the confused Yin down a red-carpeted hallway toward a VVIP room on the top floor. The double doors were pushed open. Inside the elegant room, Jungkook sat in the main chair with one leg crossed over the other, staring at Yin with an intensity that seemed capable of seeing straight through her soul. The air inside the room felt incredibly thin. Yin stood in the doorway, gripping the strap of her bag until her knuckles turned white, staring at her husband with her chest rising and falling, ready to face whatever humiliation he might throw at her. But instead, the man stood up and slowly walked toward her, like a predator that had finally decided to stop watching and start claiming its prey. Jungkook's steady steps closed the distance between them. His leather shoes made barely a sound against the thick carpet, yet every step felt like a drumbeat in Yin's ears. The woman closed her eyes, hugging her work bag tightly like a fragile shield, waiting for the sharp words that would tear apart her pride. Because of her father's recklessness with the loan sharks, she was ready to be kicked out, divorced, or even cursed at for being a poor woman who only caused trouble. But instead of hearing a cold, judgmental voice, Yin heard the soft scrape of a mahogany chair being pulled out. She slowly opened her eyes and found Jungkook standing right beside the chair he had just pulled out. The man nodded toward it, his expression showing no anger at all. "Sit down," he ordered, his voice much softer this time, almost like a calming whisper. Yin obeyed on trembling legs. She dropped into the velvet-covered chair, staring at the table already filled with all kinds of luxurious dishes, the steam still rising warmly from them. The finest cuts of steak, truffle cream soup, and all kinds of other dishes Yin had never imagined she'd get to taste were neatly arranged in front of her. Jungkook pulled out the chair beside Yin instead of sitting across the table several feet away like they always did at their penthouse. The man leaned forward, looking straight into Yin's still panicked eyes. Silence took over the room for several seconds before Jungkook raised his large, warm hand and tucked a loose strand of Yin's messy hair behind her ear. The touch of their skin made Yin flinch softly. "Stop begging other people," Jungkook said quietly, but every word carried absolute firmness. His low voice echoed through the quiet room. "If you need something, your husband is the most dangerous and richest man in the city. Use that." Yin held her breath, her eyes widening as she stared at her husband's face from such a close distance. Before she could even process his words, Jungkook leaned closer and pressed his lips against Yin's forehead. A long, warm kiss filled with possessiveness. The touch of his lips against her forehead seemed to shatter the giant wall of ice that had separated them all this time. The coldness that had always surrounded their interaction simply melted away, replaced by an unfamiliar warmth that made Yin's chest pound violently. When Jungkook pulled back, Yin's defenses completely fell apart. The tears she'd been desperately holding back since last night finally spilled over like a broken dam. She lowered her head deeply, covering her face with both hands. Her sobs broke through the silence of the luxurious room. She cried out of embarrassment that her husband had to see the most miserable side of her family, and fear that this kindness was nothing more than an illusion before Jungkook demanded an even more painful price in return. Seeing her small shoulders shaking violently, Jungkook stopped holding himself back. He pulled Yin from her chair and brought her small body into his arms. His strong arms wrapped tightly around Yin's back and waist, pressing her face against his broad chest. The masculine scent of mint and cedar would immediately fill Yin's senses. It was their first hug, a hug that felt so possessive, yet at the same time became the safest place Yin had ever known in her entire life. "Shh, it's okay. It's all taken care of," Jungkook whispered against the top of Yin's head, his chin resting comfortably there. His right hand gently rubbed Yin's back in a steady up and down motion, trying to calm her down. "From now on, every burden you have is mine too. Your dad's debt is paid off, and your house is safe. You don't have to work yourself to death trying to pay it back." Yin shook her head hard inside her husband's embrace, her fingers gripping Jungkook's black shirt until it was wrinkled. "No, I don't want to. I don't want to be some gold-digging wife. I don't want you thinking I'm just living off you. I'll pay you back little by little. I'll pay for everything even if it takes me years. But please, don't think I'm some greedy woman." Jungkook stopped rubbing her back. He pulled Yin slightly away, just so he could look straight into her teary red eyes. His jaw tightened, his expression showing deep frustration, not because of the money, but because of the way his wife kept beating herself up. "Why are you so damn stubborn?" Jungkook asked, his voice rising slightly, an unusual hint of desperation coming from a feared mafia boss. "I married you to protect you, Yin, not to watch you cry alone on the balcony in the middle of the night while begging some pathetic What's the point of me ruling the underworld and having all this money if my own wife is starving and living in fear?" Yin fell silent. Jungkook's words hit the deepest part of her heart, tearing down all the bad assumptions she'd built up this whole time. "You're the queen of my world now," Jungkook continued, his thumb gently wiping the tears from Yin's cheek. His eyes, usually as dark as a starless sky, now held an incredible softness. "Everything I have is yours. All your family's money problems are gone for good. So stop keeping track of what you owe me, because you don't owe me a damn thing. Got it?" Hearing that, Yin could no longer hold back her tears, but this time, they weren't from fear. They were from overwhelming relief. Jungkook pulled her back into an even tighter embrace, letting Yin soak his expensive shirt with her tears until her breathing gradually calmed down. That afternoon, for the first time since they got married, they shared a meal together, with a small smile occasionally appearing on Yin's face as Jungkook cut the meat on her plate for her. That night, the atmosphere in the penthouse felt completely different. The air that was usually stiff and cold somehow felt warmer. Inside the master bedroom, Yin was no longer lying at the edge of the bed with her body tense. That night, she found herself comfortably resting against Jungkook's chest, while her husband's strong arm wrapped protectively around her waist, holding her under the same thick blanket. The sound of Jungkook's heartbeat echoed steadily in Yin's ear, calming her more effectively than any medicine ever could. "Jungkook, Yin called softly, her voice breaking the peaceful silence of the night. Her index finger absent-mindedly played with the buttons of her husband's silk pajamas. Jungkook hummed, tightening his embrace and burying his face in the crook of Yin's neck, breathing in the scent of soap from his wife's skin. I'm sorry about the credit card back then, and for being so damn stubborn. Yin took a deep breath, gathering the last bit of courage she needed to expose an old wound. Back then, when I was in college, I dated someone. He came from a rich family. We were really good together, and he was always sweet to me. Jungkook stayed quiet and listened, though his jaw tightened slightly at the mention of another man. Still, he chose to let Yin finish. One day, I was about to miss my final exam because I hadn't paid the rest of my tuition. Yin continued, her voice starting to tremble as the painful memory came back to her. My dad didn't have any money, and Grandpa was sick back then. I was desperate. I worked up the courage to borrow money from my boyfriend. I begged him and promised I'd pay him back as soon as I could by working part-time after my exams. Yin swallowed, a tear slipping onto the pillow, but he looked at me like I was disgusting. In front of his friends, he threw some money in my face and said I was nothing but a gold digger using love to drain his money, even though he was the one who confessed his feelings first, not me. From that day on, I promised myself I'd never depend on a man's money again. I was so scared. I was so scared you'd look at me with the same disgust that man did. Jungkook let out a long breath, heavy and painful. He gently turned Yin around until they were facing each other. His large hands cupped both of Yin's cheeks, carefully wiping away the traces of tears. That guy was the dumbest, most blind man to ever walk this earth, Jungkook said hoarsely, staring deeply into Yin's eyes. Listen to me, Yin. You're not a gold digger. You're a hardworking woman who's trying to save her family from falling apart. The only thing you did wrong was asking a coward who had no idea how to appreciate you for help. Yin stared into her husband's dark eyes, finding a sincerity there that burned straight through her soul. And I owe you an apology too, Jungkook continued, his voice dropping lower, filled with genuine regret. Maybe this whole time, you thought I was being cold to you. I barely ever talked to you. Why did you do that? Yin whispered. I thought you really hated me and were only forced to marry me because of the old man. Jungkook gave a small smile, the first one Yin had ever seen from him, and it made him look unbelievably handsome. I run an organization full of blood and violence, Yin. I'm used to people being afraid of me, used to giving orders and having everyone follow them without question. I'm not used to being warm and friendly, especially with a woman. When my grandpa showed me your picture, I said yes not because I was forced to. And yeah, you're really beautiful, but there was something in your eyes that made me want to protect you. Jungkook moved closer, bringing their foreheads together in an intimate moment that made Yin hold her breath. I thought that by not touching you, giving you everything you needed, giving you the black card, and letting you have your own space in this penthouse, I was making you comfortable. I thought you needed some space from me because I knew you were forced into this. I wanted you to feel free, but I got it wrong. I just made my precious wife feel like a stranger who was only living under my roof. Warmth spread through every part of Yin's body. The tons of weight that had pressed against her chest for weeks disappeared without a trace. The man in front of her wasn't some cold-blooded monster, but a protector who was incredibly awkward at showing his feelings. You're really bad at expressing yourself as a husband. Yin chuckled softly through the last of her tears, finding the courage to wrap her arms around Jungkook's neck. I'll learn, Jungkook whispered right in front of Yin's lips. Starting tonight, teach me how to be the right husband for you. Without waiting for an answer, Jungkook closed the remaining distance between them. His lips brushed against Yin's with a gentleness that was completely different from his rough appearance. The kiss wasn't demanding. It was an apology, a promise of protection, and the beginning of a love that was finally, slowly blooming between them. Yin returned the kiss with all her feelings, letting herself sink into Jungkook's warmth. She knew that from this moment on, she would never have to face the cruelty of the world alone again, because she had found her forever home in this man's embrace.